Okay, so I've had the request that I can go over how we're actually going to create a query that gets a value from a filled out form. This will be very helpful for us when we're creating the print order report for a particular order that's actually being made. Before we proceed, we obviously need to actually put some data into our form. The reason being is that this field here, order number, has to be populated before we can use it to actually do a query for that order. So what we're going to do is go through the form and choose some items to go into the order. One of those and two of those. Okay, so now we have an order. Obviously Betty Sim today, and she's ordering these 3 types of plants, and this is the total for her order. Now, to be able to get this information straight onto a report as if we were printing out an invoice, and we're going to need to deal with this, the order number. But what we want really is a query which gets that order number from the orders table and then gathers all of the information about that order into that query. It's a lot easier to run a query to get information from a query into a report than it is straight from a form. So that's our process. So going to create and go back into query design as we did for the previous Shoshoska. For the previous queries we did, and my dog's hungry, he wants some dinner, but he's got to wait 5 minutes. Okay, so where were we? Okay, so we want information from orders and order items. We want information about our customer and our items themselves. Obviously customer's suburb, because that's part of that, and we're not going to worry about updated prices or new stock list, because they are our linked tables that we put in last time. So these are the tables that we need to consider, because these are the ones that have all of the data to do with our order. Okay, there we go. Right, so what do we need? Now we need to think about what actually needs to go on to the invoice. Now the way I usually do this is I draw it out. Shush, Oscar. I draw it out and put the headings of all of the information that I need to go on to the order or the invoice. So I mean, what I do need, I definitely need information about the customer. I could have the customer ID. I'm going to do our usual, rather than put first name, last name in 2 separate fields here. We're going to create a new field called full name, and the colon to say that it doesn't actually exist in the database at the moment. And then we're going to concatenate, have I done these, first underscore name, and then the at and speech mark space speech mark and. So this brings things together, and then I called it last name, and the square bracket. So if you remember, the square brackets tell Access that this is something that already exists, and we need to make sure that first name here is spelt exactly the same as it is up at the table. If you make a mistake here, when we run this query, a box will pop up asking for you to input a value for first name. That's a dead giveaway that you've actually spelt something wrong, or you haven't got the values here, the names here, exactly the same as what's in the table. It's telling you it can't find what it is you've asked it to look for. So there we go, we've concatenated first name and last name, and don't forget there is a space between these 2 speech marks. Otherwise, the 2 names will run together. Okay, so we've got customer ID, customer name, going to have address, and the suburb name and the postcode. You might have noticed I didn't put suburb from here, and I didn't put suburb ID from here, because these are just 2 IDs that link these 2 tables together. So I've gone address, then the suburb name and the postcode. That's the beauty of our relational databases. We don't need to include IDs. IDs are just there to link data together. Okay, so we've got that. Now let's have order ID would be very helpful, and I'll show you why in a second. Don't need customer because we've got customer information there. Order date would be very handy on the invoice. And then we'll have the item name. We'll have the order. We don't need because that's an ID. Quantity, sold price, and subtotal. I think that will do us. That should give us enough data to go onto our form. Sorry, not to our form, to our report. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So currently, if I was to run this, it would get all of the information about all of the orders for all of the customers out of the database. So what we need to do is make this query more specific. And the field that we're going to do that on is order ID. If we were to go back to our navigation form, we'll see that order number here is 88. So we want to get all of the information into our query about order number 88. I'm just going to make that bigger. The way we do that is in the criteria, rather than type 88, which would get the information about 88, but only 88, we want this query to look onto the form to get the value that is currently in the box here. I believe that is called, I can actually have a look, that will be called order ID. So the way we do that is we start typing a path. Now we know that that order ID is in a form. So if we start typing square brackets and then F for form, it gives us the option of forms. And to get down to the next level in the hierarchy, we type the exclamation mark. And this gives us all of the forms that we can select now. And because we're working inside navigation, and you always need to open this form inside navigation. Once your navigation's set, we've got to select navigation form and then exclamation mark. And if you remember, it's navigation subform. That is, this part of this navigation is now the subform. So now we can type exclamation marks as many times as we like and nothing will happen. This is the end of our hierarchy. What we need to do now is type a full stop and then open our square brackets again and type form. Actually, we don't need the square bracket, capital F, form, then exclamation mark, or close the square brackets first, then the full stop. That's better. And now we can go to form. It didn't work because I hadn't closed that square bracket off here, so it was just full stop. So there we go, we've got form now, and if we go exclamation mark again, it will show us all of the fields that are in our navigation subform. And the one that we want is this one here, order ID. So now the criteria for this query is going into the navigation subform and getting the order ID field, or the value that's actually in the order ID field. So we're going to go back to design up here, and hopefully if we run this query, you'll see that we actually have all of the details that we have in our navigation subform. So we want order number 88 with Betty Sim on today's date. So we've got order 88, today's date, Betty Sim, and then the 3 orders. So Daniela, Lucendron, Helibor. And that's the name of the plants, and there's the quantities and so on. So this is definitely getting this order from this form into our query. So it's doing exactly as we wanted it to. So now if I just click the cross, it will prompt me to save, and yes I do, and I'm going to give this a proper query name, and this is, let's call it order invoice query. And there we go. So our order invoice query is there now. You can see it's got the select query icon as opposed to the update query and the append query. And every time we run this, it will get all of our data from our subform. Now, with regard to testing, you've got to have data in this subform for this query to run. If you don't, let's just go back to customers and see if we can run this query. It will have nothing in it because there's no subform there. There is no order number available to actually make an order from. Let's try it again. Yes, I do need to order a quantity. And let's leave it there. Now if we run the query again, it gets the data from the form. That's who we've got. Bill Huggins from Vermont, buying 3 hibiscus. There we go. So as you can see, pretty simple process. Again, not taken very long. Been recording for 11 minutes 15 seconds and done a lot of waffle, and Oscar's asked for his dinner plenty of times, which I'm going to now go and do. So hopefully this makes perfect sense to you now, and the next stage we would just create a report using this query so we can actually get a nice looking invoice for our customer, Bill Huggins. Okay, I'll catch you again soon. Bye.